haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. I need this message to go to the optics world, and I need your help to do that. Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Optics Room. We're actually honoured to have Professor John Nolan here from the Macular Pigment Research Group in Ireland. And we have a very exciting episode coming up for you today around supplements and how they can help the macula. Quick note before we start, this episode is sponsored by MacuPrime, and the Body Doctor are official distributors of it in the UK. So let's get started. Professor John, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. No problem. Happy to join you.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how that plays a direct role into the health of people's eyes.
Okay, so my name is John. I'm a professor, John Nolan. I'm a scientist, and I run the Nutrition Research Centre Ireland. We're part of the Southeast Technological University here in Waterford, Ireland, in the southeast. So 25 years ago, I started a project linking nutrition of the eye and a disease called age-related macular degeneration. And within that initial project, we developed some opportunities, if you like, in terms of how we could use nutrition and optimize certain nutrients, which I can speak about today, and why these nutrients are so valuable for the macula, and why these nutrients have a role to play in diseases like age-related macular degeneration and even Alzheimer's disease. Now we have new published trials on that. So I essentially run the centre here in Waterford. Our team is multidisciplinary, optometrists, ophthalmologists, statisticians, nutritional biochemists. I'm a biochemist myself. Epidemiology, medicine. It's a combination of efforts, if you like, and we have published in peer-reviewed science in top journals over 117 papers on the topic. And essentially, what we've identified is that there are certain nutrients concentrated at the back of the eye, at the macula specifically, that patients with macular degeneration are deficient in. But these same nutrients, when we enrich them, we can really, within optometry and optometry practice, enhance visual function of patients across populations. So not just those with disease, but we can definitely do the right thing by optimizing the performance of the macula and thereafter protecting the macula into our later years.
So I think when we hear the word macula, optometrists, we automatically tend to think post 70 years old or post 60 years old. How important is it for us to start educating these patients from a much younger age in order to just improve the education on their part as well?
So when you think of the macula, you think of macular degeneration, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the macula is working from the second that we have vision. So it's from the cradle to the dance floor, as I put it. The macula is the center part of the retina. It's the most specialized part of the retina. It's responsible for 90% of our visual experience. It mediates central and color vision. So it's like the film of a camera. And the job of optometry, in my view, is to help their patients optimize and protect the film of the camera, whether they're 70 or whether they're 17. And what we know is that the macula, it's just like a film of a camera. If it gets damaged or if it stops working, our vision is affected. And it works the other way. I mean, why would we optimize the health of the macula today? Because we want to optimize our visual performance. I will say that all of your patients in optometry are walking around with suboptimal vision. And one of the issues that we have in eye care and optometry is how do we measure acuity? How do we measure vision? We measure acuity, which is a really it's an important measure of visual function, but it's about 9% of the total spatial visual world. So imagine if we were able to do something that enhanced all other aspects of vision. That's not just 100% contrast driven. So it's like performance. The Olympics are underway at the minute. The difference between winning and losing are the fine margins of performance. Regardless, we're working with people in the Olympics actually who are involved in archery and in shooting and so on, and some of the other sports that we've worked with is in hockey and you name it. So, and the point being is we can optimize the health of the macula today, which delivers a performance around the macula, And this, of course, is crucially important for diseases like macular degeneration. So you should be alerted to and cognizant of the role of nutrition for macular degeneration as well. But unlike what current medicine does, which is wait until the macula is so sick that the standard of care in ophthalmology is to send the patient for injections. This is the anti-VEGF therapy. That really doesn't make sense to me as a nutritional biochemist, where if we were to get in front of these diseases and protect the macula from getting sick, just think of it like sunburn. What we do is we wait till we're sunburned enough that we can employ some pharmaceutical agent to treat it. That's what happens with macular degeneration. And what I'm saying is put your sunscreen on before you go out in the sun. And that's why, if you look at, even to go back, I say from the cradle, when a mother feeds her baby, the first nutrition that a mother gives her baby are these nutrients called carotenoids. And these are the carotenoids that comprise the macular pigments. And the macular pigments are that protective antioxidant sunscreen, if you like, at the back of the eye.
So, in your opinion, why has optometry come to such a stage where we have to wait for something or a disease to occur before we start to treat it?
Because you're not trained during your optometry degrees on nutrition. You get a little bit about nutrition, but you're not doing a lot with nutrition. So optometry is not, it's education is the answer. Optometrists are not taught about the opportunities, and that's the job of people like me, scientists, to conduct the science and then translate that science. But the good news now is that we have access to science that has in real time improved people's vision, both with and pre-macular degeneration. That's the message that this podcast should give to your listeners. Waiting for the damage to be done is the wrong thing to do. Getting in front of this. And then the other thing is, what nutrients are we going to use? And that's what we've learned.
Yeah. So then, in terms of giving these nutrients, do you find it's difficult to measure the success of them compared to standard treatments like anti-VEGF?
Well, it's a different thing, because typically optometry won't be dealing with patients once they're in the anti-VEGF stage, because they're with their retinal specialist. And that's exactly the point. The role of the optometrist is for everyone else before they get to that end stage macular degeneration that requires a pharmaceutical agent. Your question is, how does one measure it? Well, good question. And it's important for any doctor to be able to monitor, track, and optimize. The first thing you need to have is the right nutritional supplement. And there's these carotenoids, there are 700 of them in nature, 50 in a diet, so we eat about 50. We've 20 in our bloodstream, thereabouts, and we've 3 of them that are biologically selected and concentrated, where they comprise the macular pigments. So you need to have the right supplement, you need to have the right amounts of supplement, and you need to have it in a way that it's formulated, that it's stable. So in our experiments, we use a product called Macuprime, which is unique in that how it's formulated, but also it contains the 3 parts of the macular pigment jigsaw: lutein, zeaxanthin, and meso-zeaxanthin. So when I say there's 3 macular pigments, that's what they are. There's many others that the retina could accumulate, but we're biologically programmed to accumulate these 3 because we need them. These are the same 3 carotenoids which become deficient as we age and as we develop macular degeneration. So the measurement of this in the clinic is difficult in terms of the carotenoid itself. In the research setting here, I have technologies that allow me image the back of the eye. I use, and you'll be familiar with OCT, I use an OCT device, the Heidelberg Spectralis, but we've optimized that to deliver dual wavelength autofluorescence. So in long story short, I can image the back of the eye and I can quantify with certainty the macular pigments. That's not clinically available at the minute. But what you do have is access to what I would call a surrogate measure. So if you can measure the carotenoids in your skin, which is non-invasive, quick to do, and now available for clinic, it's something that we've seen to be very successful in America, for example. And it's growing in popularity in Ireland now as well, with great success. So by measuring that, the eye doctor can do a profile of their patient at the beginning to see if they're high, medium, low. And if there's positive lifestyle and nutrition advice required, that can be delivered, including the appropriate supplementation.
So it's interesting that it's actually quite developed in the US and starting to in Ireland as well. Why do you think elsewhere, like where I am in London, for example, why is it very slow to catch up?
I think the translation of it comes back to medical practices and medical systems, which you have to operate within. So I'm not critical of eye doctors. I think it's more challenging because the systems in the UK are less open to allowing in what I would call disruptive technologies, um, albeit that they're technologies that have science and validation behind them. And if you think about it, and if you were to allow me get a little bit provocative at the moment, I will say that current health systems, and particularly in the UK, operate on what's called Health 2.0, which is exactly what I've just said to you today. We wait for a disease to be present before we try to treat it. And that's great because we can treat lots of diseases and we should celebrate that. But eye care and optometry in particular has a role to play in Health 3.0, which is basically getting in front of these diseases, getting in front of them and doing lifestyle preventative changes that now have evidence to show that they're going to play a role. Now, there's some wonderful eye doctors in the UK, in London, and optometrists as well. Some of our members of our brain and ocular nutrition network that we run are from the UK and are really leading the way there. But it's to get that information across to the other systems and to get it approved by those systems for use. And the other thing, I suppose, is maybe a lack of confidence in the supplement industry itself. And I get that completely. Why would one be, you know, there's an expression before about snake oil, and there's a lot of snake oil out there. But that's why I would say to your listeners and your eye doctor colleagues that there's also a lot of information out there that shows true science. And that's why MacuPrime is unique in that regard, because when we do our science on these particular formulas, the science starts with how we harvest them from the marigold flowers. These carotenoids are harvested from flowers essentially in Mexico. They're processed, they're formulated, they're protected from oxidation, they're stable over shelf life. And MacuPrime and other organizations are now part of the supplement certified movement, which is this kind of quality piece. Because when you make a recommendation to a patient, you want to make a recommendation that's not going to harm them and highly likely to help them. I get that. Now the science can show you that how to do that. The other piece that's required now is the quality piece. And if you put both of those together, that there's companies like MacuPrime that can deliver a quality and formula that has that scientific backing, well then as a doctor you can be sure that you're making the right decision to help your patient. And then you can gain value from, I mentioned 117 papers, demonstrating the improvement of vision for 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, children. We run a program at the moment, we're calling it the Lunchbox Project, where I was just talking about at lunch with my own team just before I came up today about highly processed foods and the challenge of even myself as a nutrition professor at home with two young girls, the foods that we can give them on a daily basis. It's not easy. But we know that if we can increase, and just kind of a general comment here would be, this is about supplements. I study supplements and I'm proud of that. But foods that are good for these carotenoids as well would be eggs, spinach, peppers, these leafy greens, colored fruits and vegetables. Try and get as much of those into your patients' diets and your family's diets as possible.
Yeah.
But I will say clearly here and unapologetically, even when you do that, we don't have enough of these protective micronutrients, even from the healthy foods. So there has to be, for certain populations, an education that delivers food supplements that have this testing and that will deliver the outputs. And we know with MacuPrime, and by the way, first disclosure, I don't own MacuPrime. I don't own any supplement. My university has licensed the intellectual property to those organizations for commercial. And I'm happy for that to happen, because I know when I speak to someone like you and we collectively educate the listeners, that at least you can make a recommendation that has a scientific background. And that's important.
Yes, I think there needs to be a medium now between what you're doing and how that translates onto the high street in the test room. Because clearly there's a lot of evidence, you've done your trials, you've done your papers, and you've done your part of the work. But now maybe it's up to other people within the industry to actually get that across to the patients. Because people who are on the front line often not as educated, or maybe very skeptic about, do these actually work? Or are they just regular off the shelf vitamins, for example? And then when patients ask us, "Oh, does this actually work?" or they come in after a year to say, "Okay, I've been using this for a year now. Has it had any effect?" What can we say to them then?
So it depends on what, firstly, again, it depends on what supplement they're using. I won't be surprised if some of the supplements don't deliver an effect because 70% of them don't match their label claim. And that's a responsibility of regulatory. But what you can say to the people, if you as a doctor make a recommendation for a carotenoid formula like MacuPrime that has the evidence base, You can measure the skin carotenoids, like we said, but you should and could measure vision and not just acuity. So I'd be measuring contrast sensitivity at 6 cycles per degree. This is a measure of my visual function. That matters to me. Okay. It's a measure of visual function that if we optimize the nutrition of the back of the eye, will get better. It's a measure of visual function if we're about to get a disease that gets worse. So without sounding condescending, I'm saying to eye doctors, measure vision. It sounds obvious. But how busy are you? You don't do it.
Very, very
You're
busy.
very busy. You have limited time with your patients. You get an acuity done by a technician, maybe. You read the acuity, patient may be unhappy, but you're okay. You're 20/20 or 6/6. Oh, patient's not happy. I'll tell you why they're not happy. I've seen it and I know why they're not happy. It's their contrast sensitivity is deteriorating. And that's what matters to them subjectively. That's how they feel.
Yeah, it makes
So,
sense because we often see people, oh, you can see 6/6. That's it, you're done. But then they're like, actually, I just still can't see properly.
yeah.
And you're wondering why. What's the problem?
Well, I guarantee you, if you measure, and you have on all your visual systems, testing systems that you have, within those, there's contrast sensitivity testing. You're just not showing how to turn them on and how to implement them. And I get it. I'm not trying to be condescending here. I get the time stresses that your colleagues have. But I can only tell you this, any eye doctor that I've seen implement this into clinic practice has got major benefit for their patient and for their practice. It
Yeah,
takes it to another level. Whether, regardless of supplements, if you measure contrast sensitivity, you're going to know when a patient is more likely to need cataract than not, and not live in a world of acuity. Because when you do cataract surgery, for example, yeah, acuities will get better, but what really changes is the contrast sensitivity, and that changes in line with how your patient feels. Okay. So there's so much value to implementing a test of vision in your clinic and finding a way to do that. Your patients will know. I've patients now that we've seen that are on the MacuPrime formula for 15 years. And, my own mom being one of them, my own mother was one of the first patients I saw bruising in on my fundus camera downstairs. And then when we had the OCT, and yeah, she changed her lifestyle a bit. She started taking MacuPrime, and I've never had to speak to my mom about macular degeneration again. And
that's
that's
lovely.
that's a
Yeah.
sample of n=1, but an important one.
Yeah. I think when it's family, it's a lot more close to home, isn't it? And
So,
then it's great that you've actually put her on that because you can actually show that actually I did this to one of my closest people
mm.
and look at the effect on that.
She's never
Um,
gone a day without it. She's
yeah,
never gone a day without it. Yeah, I never will.
good. So do you think that there's a need to shift the industry of optometry in terms of less of a refractive correction for a clinic and move more towards a health side of eyes? Because the way technology is coming, AI is coming, a lot of the jobs that we do will easily be done by someone else in a few years' time. So maybe now is the right time to
Yeah,
pivot and move towards that part of optometry.
that would be wonderful if that can happen. And the other thing I'd say to you is, in terms of, the relationship between the optometrist and the ophthalmologist is really important here, because with respect, ophthalmologists in mainstream ophthalmology equally don't know about nutrition of the eye or macular pigments, and they will default to the ARID study, which is now, very old science. Um, and they feel very comfortable about that because, again, this fear of first do no harm, and what am I not going to get in trouble by doing, kind of thing. That's how stressed our medical systems are, right? But what I would say to all parts of this equation is, please look at the new science, look at that, and even the ARIDS formula, which is kind of the go-to in ophthalmology. What's available on the shelves is not the ARIDS formula.
Yeah,
It's not the same formula. The NIH and a commercial company did a project which was successful for intermediate stage AMD, 26% risk reduction. Then we'd ARIDS 2, where they added in lutein and zeaxanthin. And by simply adding those macular pigments, which I've been speaking about, we got this extra benefit. And that's great. That's still only two parts of an important jigsaw, which is made up of three. It was missing that central carotenoid meso-zeaxanthin, and that's what the new science has shown. Having meso-zeaxanthin particularly for patients with or at risk of macular degeneration, is a crucial piece of that. I'd also say, if you look at the ARID study itself, they promote 80 milligrams of zinc. I certainly wouldn't recommend that, low zinc. So I would go better by having the 3 carotenoids, and I would go safer by having low levels, if any, of zinc. My personal view is that it's the carotenoids that are doing the work
Okay.
locally at the macula, because that's what if we chop up a macula, which has been done, and you do HPLC, which we've done, you see what's there in nutrition. So we know what's going on. We know how to measure it. We know how to source it. The only missing piece now is improving the quality, regulatory platform, and giving doctors like yourself and your colleagues a platform to operate safely.
Yeah. And then it comes down to education, both for the optometrist and for the public as well. So now, say we're in the test room, we've got the ideal patient for this supplement. What language can we use to inform the patient that actually this is what's beneficial for you and this is how it's going to work?
Funny, when you ask that, my default is to not AMD. It's to a patient that's there because they want to optimize their vision. That's my default. So I'll do that scenario, and then we'll do the
Yeah,
other.
absolutely. Yeah.
In that scenario, it's having a conversation with the patient. Is that, are you happy with your vision? Would you like to know a way that you can even enhance the health and the functionality around your vision? And if just ask them that question, it's that simple. Would you like to find a way to improve your vision even further and protect your vision into your later years? And if the answer to that question from your patient is yes, well, you say, well, based on 2 decades of scientific experiment and based on a quality program that has delivered a macular pigment supplement via MacuPrime, we can locally enhance your protective pigments and we can enhance your vision. And we know that's going to protect you into your later years. For the patient with macular degeneration, I would say that absolutely, if AMD is in the conversation, it is a no-brainer that your patient has to be on every day a carotenoid supplement that's going to benefit them. Again, back to that one that has that quality evidence base. And I would not do what retinal ophthalmology currently does, which is say, only use it if it's intermediate AMD, because that's what ARIDS has shown. That's nonsense. That's like saying that sunscreen is only going to protect you if you're a little bit sunburnt. Just think about it. Think about what these nutrients are doing. So if it's AMD is in the conversation, and I do believe that MacuPrime have an ARIDS type supplement where they provide those 3 parts of the macular pigment, and also with an ARIDS like, so they have the other co-nutrients that were used in ARIDS, including zinc, and so on. So I would recommend that they're informed by that. And then maybe the kickback will be, well, do I need to take it forever? Is it expensive? And I get it. It's a tough conversation. But again, I go back to my mom as the case study. She doesn't have a lot of income. Every euro she has is important to her. But this is part of her monthly shopping because it's something that gives her vision. And that's worth everything. The most expensive supplement you'll buy is the one you don't take, or even worse, the one that doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important to take one that's been backed scientifically by people like you.
Yeah. And we've access to that now. And with full disclosure, as I said, my university licensed the IP. There's a great organization in the UK called the Herd Foundation out of Cambridge. Dr. Alan Howard, who's was the original collaborator and founder, and the Herd Foundation have continued his great work supporting this type of research, and that intellectual property has been licensed now and commercialized, and that's currently being distributed via the MacuPrime team and the Body Doctor team in the UK. That's the connection.
That's amazing, and I hope that things like this can shift optometry into a more health-related aspect in the very, very near future, so that we can actually treat people's eye health rather than just do a refraction and let them go. And that's the aim. That's the aim.
Your patients want more than refraction, because
that's so much more.
You're going to limit the number of people you can help if you just live in a world of refraction.
That's it. The high street is so busy, and maybe that's a conversation for another day. Sure. But thank you so much, Professor, for your time. So many golden nuggets in there, actually, that I learned myself, and it's refreshing to hear that side of optometry and that side of the eyes, in fact, because it's something that in the high street we're just not used to. But I hope that you carry on the good work that you're doing, and we see the fruits of it in the public very soon.
No pun intended. We see the fruits. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Right.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.